So first of all, just to complete, I guess, she said, thank you to me. I think it's the other way around. It's your interest, your passion, your participation that makes this worthwhile. And that's what makes the investment, meaningful. I think the one thing that I want to highlight is I run an ecosystem program where our success is largely dependent on the community. And our goal here is, unlike a lot of other ecosystem programs that you see in the industry where it's logo exchange, co-marketing, and you basically tell, hey, we have so many people in the community. Now, what's the meaning of that? What have you done with them, right? So the goal of network builders is a little bit different. We started with a mission to accelerate network transformation. And with that as the essence, it was all about how do we drive NFV, virtualization, more efficiency, more scale into the network. And as we embark on the 5G and the edge journey, I guess we are now moving from network transformation, which has been very successful. In fact, now you see in a large number of deployments coming to bear across the world. We are now embarking into digital transformation. And so the goal is really not just about specific technology. It's really about solving problems in the industry. And the gaps could be higher up in the vertical stack. It could be use case specific. It could be just new monetizable services. So we don't necessarily restrict ourselves to, okay, this is all about platforms and it is all about a specific part of the network. It's really about whatever is in the way of solving this problem, and so that the digitization, the transformation, the virtualization, cloudization is happening faster. That's really the intent and the goal. And so if you have ideas, if you have opportunities where you see that there is a gap in the industry, and that gap is now coming in the way of making this happen, Intel will play in it. Right? We will try and work with you so that we can solve this problem together. So net, I think it requires full community participation and support to make this work. And I'll talk about network builders briefly afterwards. And by the way, having a session, presentation right after dinner, not a good idea. So if I loss of thoughts, it's because of the delicious food outside. Sorry? Well, that depends on how I deliver my presentation. So frankly, what I wanted to do was really give you some high points on how it's maybe a personal perspective on how I see things moving this time around versus 2G to 3G, 3G to 4G transitions. And frankly, this perspective is built, I must say, with influence from the broader community, right? So we keep getting this inputs and through interactions, and you start building an idea of how things are happening this time around. But just to highlight, we all know about WhatsApp and Skype and WeChat and how successful they have been, and the dollar amount, and they were pretty small companies. Of course, behind the scenes, there are hundreds of others that do not succeed. But one thing that I think is important to consider here is that when e-commerce really started picking up, one of the cutting edge application was notification from a vendor or a customer via email on BlackBerry. And that was huge. At that time, we were struggling to figure out what kind of innovative applications can come because the behavior was not there, right? In the last 5 to 10 years, our behavior has changed. We are using technology in a very different way. And now if you look at automation and how the connected devices are going to work, it will further change our behavior. And I think that's the part which leaves a lot to open. And what we are seeing this time around is there is almost a transatlantic race. We are seeing really aggressive moves on part of China. India is starting to follow the suit. You see Japan and Korea. And now I guess US is playing its part. I wish we would say that no, we are at we are leading the way, but no, there is work to be done. And we are working with the federal government and influencing the standard bodies, et cetera, to make it work. But the bottom line is that it's almost a race this time. And so there is a pace at which 5G is being deployed that we did not see necessarily in the 4G timeframe. And the other piece is that all of the IoT deployments and all the connectivity and automation is starting to bring up newer, innovative ideas every day. In fact, simple things. We had very recently, right, a industrial large corporation come and talk about a problem they're having on the assembly line. Wi-Fi is being used, robots are controlling the stuff, and because of the lack of reliability in the connection, a slight glitch is causing major problems for them. And so they're going for, first they're saying private LTE, but ideally they would want to go with 5G. Simple. This is not, earth-shattering, innovative application. These are simple solutions that can make a huge difference, right? And on the enterprise side, it's starting to happen much faster. And then we talked about the gaming as well. One thing that we need to keep in mind also as we look into 5G and edge is, it's not just about bandwidth, right? There was a lot of discussion about bandwidth. It's also the reliability, the flexibility, how the latency that you're getting, and the bandwidth. So there are a lot of things that are being addressed, especially with 5G NR, that I'll talk about in a moment. So I'll skip this one. I think by the way, show of hands, how many of you have seen either this slide or something similar to it in the last? All right, okay, no surprise, right? So everybody talks about 50 billion connected devices, mobile broadband just skyrocketing, and 1 million autonomous cars on the road by 2025. Whether they happen by 2025, earlier or later, I think it's a moot point. The bottom line is that this is opening a huge number of possibilities in terms of applications, innovative services, and business models. So this innovation is not just happening at a technical level, even in how the carriers, the cloud service providers, enterprises are approaching the market and how they are monetizing is changing rapidly. And there are some phenomenal new ideas coming up across the ecosystem. If you look at, and this is what I was highlighting here, that if you look at history, you had at least 10 to 15 years, in even more if you go to 2G, from 2G to 3G, but 3G to 4G a decade, and now you are at the beginning of 5G as an inflection point, which is driving a lot of things. So we are seeing, for example, the NFV deployments accelerate rapidly because of 5G being around the corner. And not only that, even though edge by itself has a value prop, and it can solve problems with private LTE and just having infrastructure closer to the consumers, closer to the enterprises, can make a difference. 5G is catalyzing it and accelerating it at a much faster pace, right? And that's the difference here. I think the pace we are seeing now is phenomenal. I almost relate it to, I don't know if you have looked at some of the inferences scientists have made about evolution, and it was the conclusions are that it used to be extremely slow for the over 3 million years. The evolution happened at a certain pace, and it accelerated in the last 10,000 years just because of the intellectual capacity of humans and how it influenced. So it's very similar. We are now getting into a faster role as we go into the 5G space. And the proof is in the pudding. You can see deployments happening. You see tests. So there are proof points coming across the world. So here in US, you see it in China. The 5G technology showcase was the largest one that was built with Korea Telecom and Intel in Pyeongchang at the Winter Olympics, and we are now looking at 5G at 2020 Tokyo Olympics. In fact, that was a great show. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the drones and the whole display. In fact, I mentioned earlier to Faraz, not everything is known to every employee. I guess it's very much like an intel. But AT&T sort of it's a public stated statement that we are going to have nationwide rollout of 5G by 2020, right? So that it's just 2 years away. That's a massive statement and a massive undertaking, right? Verizon just announced a successful 5G test in Houston with a latency between 10 to 15 milliseconds, and this is combined over the air as well as through the entire data path. And this is significant because, again, it's not just that people are talking about it. There are now proof points that are being deployed. And that there's a lot of learning behind it. And I know of multiple carriers that are trying to change the game completely, which is go to 5G, but leave all the baggage behind, take DevOps approach, and really build a true telco cloud, right? And this is not something that is just being contemplated or we will do it somehow. I don't know how to transition in the next 10 to 15 years. I know of a couple of carriers that are actually in active deployment, active development stage, and we are looking at literally early next year for some of the deployments to start happening. And I mentioned, I guess, it's not just because 5G gives the promise of bandwidth. Again, it gives flexibility. It depends on how you engineer it, how you architect it. If you do it right, I think there are a lot of possibilities here. It's not going to be nirvana. It's not going to solve the complete bandwidth problem. And I agree with all the people who sort of question that. And it should be questioned. I think it's a question of now, with this capabilities, if you have a reliable connectivity, if it's flexible, if it's efficient, now you can start putting SLS behind it. And that's critical because now it's monetizable, right? So you can slice it and you can say we will guarantee an SLA for the service that we provide because now we can manage how the data path works, which connectivity it uses. And by the way, depending on how the network behaves, we may come back to you and give you a much lower cost monthly subscription to much better reliable connection later, just similar to your Roku or cable offering you new channels, right? Once you are hooked onto the main, you can continue to get additional benefits. And this is the benefit that AI and ML brings, right? So with machine learning and artificial intelligence, you can now learn more about the network. And as you do that, you can continue to improvise and offer more services to the end users. And that includes enterprises and consumers. So those possibilities now develop much faster. But here's an important one to consider. It's something that we have seen a little bit of motion on, and I don't know, Faraz, if you're aware of this or some other folks at AT&T, but we are seeing, for example, SD-WAN UCP is really picking up in the enterprise space, right, for obvious reasons. Huge benefit in terms of efficiency, policy management, flow of traffic. Now they're adding security and routing capability, and you have a superset, universal CPE. The interesting part here is that this is being delivered as managed services by carriers, right? And it's not necessarily intercepting with Internet of Things on the other side. If you now start looking at network as a service, so if a carrier is providing the SD-WAN UCP capability as a base foundation on which you overlay IoT services, that makes a very compelling case, because what happens now is that a lot of these Internet of Things applications are connected directly to the cloud service provider, and the connectivity in between is just, it's best effort right now because it's not in the control. They're getting the connectivity from the carriers, but carriers are not necessarily playing heavily as a value-added service provider. If carriers are managing the white box and the network as a service, and you have IoT as an overlay, now you have an opportunity to build applications that glue both of these stacks And that application provides network awareness to the IoT application. So you can have dynamic adaptations in the IoT application based on the network conditions. If you have congestion, okay, this high definition video cannot be delivered. You need to go to standard definition. You have, if a security breach is involved and it's a mission critical application, you can adapt quickly. So dynamic adaptation of these applications with network intelligence, I think, is starting to gain momentum and understanding, and the developer opportunity is really to build applications around network analytics, around AI and ML applications that deliver this awareness of the network in real time to the IoT use cases. Please.
Upper left-hand corner of your slide, sub 1 millisecond delay end-to-end low latency apps. Where are the ends?
Good question. I don't know.
Exceed the speed of light?
Yeah. No.
Laughing, I'm serious.
No, I understand. No. So I'm laughing because I agree with you. I'll have to check with the technical expert who did this.
Coding 5 milliseconds.
Yeah.
Bouncing off the
No, that doesn't sound right. No, that doesn't sound right. You're right. I guess needless to say, people are expecting very low latency. I don't want to go into the numbers here, but yeah, that doesn't sound right.
Well, but you're guaranteeing this is an SLA? Sign me up. Got entangled quantum particles? Yeah, let's go.
Yeah. I would be the first one to do that as well. So this one I already covered. I think the bottom line is that you have opportunities at telco edge, enterprise edge, far edge, and yes, you're not going to have heavy compute in every place in every location. It doesn't make any sense. And Faraz actually articulated that really well. You can have much lighter end devices thanks to now the performance and the connectivity that you get much closer to the consumers and the enterprises. So now you can have much more reliable and much more secure delivery of applications. And here, I guess, how we define the edge, and again, this is primarily looking at how we work with community and the ecosystem, and how we develop proof points. We look at the edge all the way from the central offices, as Faraz mentioned earlier, next generation central offices, all the way to the wireless base stations. And so literally just living out the end devices or things. And the reason why we capture it this way is because what we have seen is, again, from implementation standpoint, there are variety of models that we have found in terms of where you place your compute and where it becomes optimal depending on the use case. And that negotiation of compute, usually we have seen within this range a lot. And I think this is so we have found in some cases it just helps to bring it closer to the next generation central office as a centralized thing. In some cases, keep it on-prem, and in some cases, it's on the poles. But we have identified app opportunities in each of these areas, and we are working on it. In fact, you will see some announcements over the next couple of quarters, and that's actually best represented on this slide. So we have, we are developing reference platform architecture, of course, with a regression-tested foundation that is much more stable. But then on top of it, we are also working with end users, telcos, communication service providers, and enterprises, and developing stacks that will be available open sourced, so that we can have a broader community participation in it. And you will see some of these being announced literally in the next couple of months. So there is an opportunity, keep an eye for it, because we will be promoting development on these APIs and stacks And the way we are doing it is by providing training, by providing application engineering support, by exactly in these setups, these meetups that we are having here, by promoting innovation. And so one of the programs we have is Innovator program. On the network builder side, where we are dealing with a large community, we are also having a program called Winner Circle, where we recognize innovators and partners that are working closely with us in delivering to the gaps in the industry, right? So they're helping close the gaps and working on new initiatives and driving it forward. We recognize that and bring more visibility to them. So the Network Builders program today has about 350 plus members, and that includes 35 plus telcos. We work with a large number of telcos, but it's not everybody is in the Builders program. And through this program, obviously, we have worked on a large number of proof of concepts, trials, deployments. We have trained developers, and again, thanks for your participation. I think you make this program very successful. And then on top of that, what's not even captured here is how we have built our Network Builders University. And we are seeing some tremendous interest from the carriers because there is a wholesale need over there for training to move them into the cloudization, right? So NFV as well as the principles of cloudization and what is required there. So we are providing, investing directly with telco carriers to ensure that we are able to help accelerate the whole transformation effort in the industry. And we work with, again, tens of carriers around the world to make it happen. As I mentioned earlier, we are building reference architectures, reference platform design for optimal network storage and compute performance, and all three for sure. What we are making sure is that the drivers, the capabilities that we bring from different technologies that come into the server and the software layers are all interoperable, all the bugs are removed, and it's a stable, solid foundation. And that's what Intel Select solution is all about. So this was introduced in mid-2016 as an initiative and continues to build momentum in the market. And finally, I would like to recognize the innovators that have been working with us. Again, this program is really about rewarding those who bring innovative ideas, are working closely with us, again, engineering support, and providing a close linkage. This you can view as the first step. So Innovator program here sort of starts the relationship with Intel, where we are working very closely with you and supporting you. But the idea is to then carry it forward to the broader Network Builders program, which is a broad community program and has a lot more assets and investment from Intel that is available as a benefit to the community. So I'll let Sujata speak a few more words on each of these innovators because she's been closer to this program.
Before I say anything, apologies for the innovators who are not here. Sorry, Prem, you confirmed at the last minute. Yeah. And Harsh, I didn't know you will be here. But yeah, just because they're not on the slide doesn't mean that their contribution is not appreciated. So Frederick is here. So he's been working with us since last year. He said he is at Red Hat, but today was his last day at Red Hat. But so at Innovator program, we don't, doesn't matter where they belong to. Frederick is still an innovator, even though he's not at Red Hat. So
the other way, he's real innovator now.
That's true.
Because he's independent and he can make the change much faster.
So So when he came on board on our program, basically he was looking at getting support on AI. So he was looking at intersection of networking and AI, and that's why he came on board, and we supported him through early innovation project. And that's what he's been working on. And he told me that he's moving to a company which is doing AI. I forget the name of the company. You want to say something about that?
So there were a couple things. So first, the Open Network Intelligence project. So the idea was to basically allow AI to be driven over in the data plane itself, so you can make decisions about the data going through, or also to make decisions that would affect the control of the data plane. That also led to a lot of the ideas that, like, while working on that, I also realized that getting data in and out of a container was still a problem, especially in the Kubernetes world. So that also led to some work that I did with the open source community in that area. So especially around the creation of network service mesh. And from the AI side, it's also helped me with, like, working on these type of projects has definitely helped me with gaining the expertise so I can also work in the AI space. And so I'm not leaving networking. I'm still going to be doing a lot of stuff in this particular space. It's, as you mentioned as well, it's independent, which means that I don't have a company who is going to affect my decisions in that way. And so I can look at, like, okay, well, what's going to be best for the community as well. So not to say that Red Hat was bad with that. Red Hat was actually excellent with that. So they were very hands-on.
It's a very innovative company itself, but again, the pace changes, I guess.
Yeah,
in a large company versus an individual. I guess that was my point.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's nothing bad with them or anything like that. So, but yeah, absolutely. Like I want to make sure that this area like has to, like, I think the best way to describe it as well, like in the 5G space, like all the stuff that you mentioned is predicated on us being able to actually deliver things. It's not just about the radio. So the radio is an important part, but you still have to have all the infrastructure to back it. And right now we're lacking that infrastructure. And so I actually think a lot of building up to the 5G space is actually getting it to the point where we can have this fungible and horizontally scalable infrastructure. So,
thank you.
Very good point, actually. It's not just about radio, it's the infrastructure to make it really, and how well you engineer it.
Yeah. So Luca mentioned here, he's not here, of course, he's in Italy, he's based out of Italy. And the reason why I mentioned him is, how many of you have heard of DPDK? Yeah, almost everybody, right? So right around the time when DPDK came into existence, Luca Deri came up with an idea of NDPI. It's an equivalent solution and it has a following also. But recently he started working with us, and now he's working with the DPDK community, and he presented at the DPDK Summit. So that's an example of the impact individual developers can make. Amar was supposed to be here, but looks like he needed to go. He had some school drop-off, pick-up duty, something like that. He's author of a book on OPNFV, and he's founder of Arna Networks. He's been working very closely with us. He's worked on doing hands-on trainings with us. Probably you would have taken one of the hands-on trainings that he did with us. As has Brain been doing, and Courier and OpenDaylight, and he used to be at Ericsson before, and now he's at Lumina. Brain, do you want to say?
So of course, just to talk about the Intel Innovator, this provided a platform to showcase some of the work we do in open source. Particularly Frederick and me, we have been working on a project called COE, wherein we were essentially looking to enable OpenDaylight to support some of the 5G and edge use cases. So that is where it all started. And then what I did was we had a series of online as well as hands-on lab facilitated by the Innovator forum. And the intent was essentially people can, instead of just listening, can also play around with, get to know about Kubernetes, get to know about the networking challenges, and also try to see how a hybrid environment works, particularly VM versus the container world, how they interoperate. That was the intent. And just to give more about it, we are also extending, as Frederick was mentioning, we are also extending it to network service mesh. Probably we will also soon reach out to see if we can have hands-on lab around that. Yeah, just also one other call out, we also have a meetup next week planned, primarily focused on 5G and Edge. And just to give a bit about Lumina, we are also focusing mostly on open solutions, wherein we are trying to build infrastructure that can be truly composable and to enable 5G and Edge as a use case scenario. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Prem. So we have Harsh Verma in the room. He is primarily an IoT innovator, but then he's also interested in the networking aspect of it. Probably he's the longest standing innovator in the room.
I didn't know that. Thanks so much. Yeah, so I've been mostly passionate about IoT and its applications for intelligent transportation systems. That's where my background, looking at transportation systems, transportation infrastructure, intelligent crosswalk. So I've been working with the Intel, hackathons, and then the Innovator program, looking at IoT, and then basically right now I'm looking at AI and machine learning at the edge with the Intel Movidius. Actually, that's a great product. So telling people that I always carry a Movidius in my pocket, and it's really helping to building out convolution neural networks at the edge. And this is something that's going to be happening, with 5G. Is going to be very much there. So I think that's why I'm really interested with the network builder program as well, to see how we can build that up. Intelligence at the edge with IoT at the edge, at the heart of some of that's going to happen right now. I'm based in Sacramento, and so it was a little drive coming up here. I have to step out a little early, but I thought I'll stay back for this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Harsh, for staying back, and thank you to the innovators and all the participants, seriously, but really especially, I guess, for your enthusiasm, participation. Really appreciate it. Hopefully, you're finding all of this helpful and meaningful in your journey and your growth. But again, I as I mentioned, I think especially as Intel is as strong as its community, really, and we respect and appreciate that. So I think our investments will continue to be directed towards strategic areas, and those areas obviously are basically whatever we all as an industry are searching for. So you will see more of these investments and announcements coming around 5G Edge, especially. It used to be heavy on the NFV side. I think there's still some investment going on in there, but again, there's a shift, and I think there is now a search for how do we help communication service providers gain a foothold in telco clouds. So thanks a lot for your time, and if there are any questions, please go ahead. But again, it was a very high-level overview. Please go ahead. I'm not the expert on standardization. So that you want to say a few words around that, but at a very high level, certainly I know it's not where it needs to be. There are some gaps, and there's some amount of fragmentation that is starting to surface. I guess this is a bit of a reflection of how things are. From an interoperability perspective, I think there is more progress in general. But individually, country standards there are still fragmentation. The good news is that there is recognition that if this is done the way CDMA and GSM was done, it will be a huge disaster. And so there is quite a bit of combined work. There is some serious activity going on, and I know Intel is involved in that. Across all of these efforts to see how we can bring it together. Unfortunately, I don't have the insight and the details behind it. I'll have to sort of defer that to one of our subject matter experts who is focusing on it.
What is your thoughts on CBRS and adoption, as well as the private 5G? So that enterprises can adopt it for their own network?
So again, I think when it comes to private deployment of 5G, generally speaking, we are finding out that even LTE is starting to really be helpful in solving problems. I think it's not just because the license spectrum used in a limited way is starting to solve the problem. I do believe that you will see CBRS deployments in, I guess, in pockets where you have higher sensitivity applications, especially on the industrial side. We are seeing more interest in general. But outside of that, I think the question of private CBRS deployment has, I don't know, I guess for us, you may be able to comment on this, but we have had basically people coming on both sides of the coin and saying, this is not going to work. We will need an alternative. And honestly, they've actually talked about LTE as an alternative, which shocked me. So your view here.
Thanks. I look at it from an additive standpoint. So if you believe that 5G is basically going to be open, multipath, and let you have multiple spectrums that you can sort of run simultaneous sessions through, then it's just one more channel. And it's a good thing to have. If you think that it is the end-all, be-all, it's obviously not enough. But as an add-in to it, it's not a bad way. How do you manage it, and how do you ensure that there's information integrity across all the different channels? Nobody's figured that part out yet.
And there is a simplicity of implementation that is causing the LTE to pick up. Over time, maybe once the complex algorithms are built and you can have this multipath approach ironed out, there may be a different answer to it. But just in general, the traction, not seeing as much.
Yeah. Hi, this is Tite speaking, Prem. Because, I came from NTT Docomo to now in the cable industry. And I found there one was a very unique difference between telco, especially in mobile industry, and cable, because I now have a both experience. And especially particularly in the CBRS is very attractive in the cable industry. Because, honestly speaking, if I still stay in the mobile industry like NTT Docomo, maybe I'm not interested. Because we already have their own footprint. However, you can imagine, so how cable industry like Comcast can compete with AT&T and Verizon, it's very hard to compete in the same area. However, CBRS might be some possibility for non-existing mobile operator like a cable industry, and who has already have a huge footprint all over the nationwide, like a cable operator. And some particular some use cases like a neutral host environment to provide with some private LTE network, especially targeted for enterprise, like a school or hospital or hotel chain and entertainment. Those kind of very specific application and can very very huge opportunity to compete with existing mobile operator. So in this sense, I said that's the reason why cable industry is very keen to get into a CBRS, but not all the use cases, very specific. Especially in my personal opinion, that's not the cable industry opinion, but my opinion is one of the very competitive area will be a neutral NHN, neutral host network.
That's a great point, actually, because you're not going to be able to build an LTE network overnight, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Right. Thanks a lot, folks. Hope you have a good session.